Hi everyone, my name is Adena from Adena Rose Ayurveda, and I'm making this quick video today about making Kitchari. Kitchari is a dish made with rice and mung beans, and it is a big part of cleansing in Ayurveda, as you've probably heard from my posting information about my 7-day Ayurvedic cleanse course and my 1-day Kitchari cleanse. And here's what it's all about. So Kitchari is said to be easily digestible. And the crux of any healing and also preventative medicine in Ayurvedic medicine is that your digestive fire, your Agni, is working well, is balanced, meaning that it's strong and that we're protecting it from the influence of the elements and the doshas. So making Kitchari doesn't have to be a big deal, but for some of you who might be new to cooking for yourself or cooking at home, this funky word might seem a little bit overwhelming, and using mung beans might seem like a kind of a foreign ingredient. But I just want to show you how simple it can be, that there are so many different ways to make it, that it's going to come out different depending on the day, depending on the season, depending on your mood, and that's okay, and that's fine. It took me a long time to learn how to make it the way that I like it, and to get it into my routine, that it was just going to be not such a big process, such a big deal. So the key ingredients of Kitchari are mung beans, basically, and a grain. Traditionally, white basmati rice is used. Even though I know we are bombarded a lot by the information that white flour, white rice isn't as nutritious, which is true, but white rice is going to be the most easily broken down and easily digestible, especially good to use during times where your immune system is actually particularly compromised, during times of acute illness or sickness, or times of coming out of a cleanse where we really need to be careful to take care of Agni, our digestive capacity. But during springtime, during kapha season, using a little more of a rough grain, maybe a whole grain like brown rice or quinoa that has a little more of a scraping action, cleansing action, can be used safely, especially if it's just you're just making Kitchari for yourself for a simple meal. And today I think we'll use whatever I have. We'll just see what I have, and that's kind of how I cook. We're going to use what we have. And so mung beans. Today I have split mung beans, and we're going to just make a small batch, enough for me and my husband probably for dinner. And these are split, and you'll see something called split green mung. That's traditionally mung dal, is green on the outside, or split yellow. And if they don't have any trace of green on them and they're not organic, I would suggest that you find something that is organic, because they may have been dyed or processed. A lot of the split that you'll find will have a little bit of the green hull still on them, and that's fine. That just, again, adds a little more fiber and a little more roughness, but they will still break down. The whole mung beans, if you find those, sometimes those are more easily found and organic in the store, you will probably want to soak those for at least 4 hours, or overnight is even best. Then they'll really break down, because again, this meal is about being easily digestible, so you want those beans to break down well. But today, using the split mung, we're just going to use them as they are, and they're going to break down for us in our Kitchari. So the second key ingredient in Kitchari is our grain, and I happen to have some quinoa and I have some millet. And both of these are completely whole grains, and they're said to be balancing for kapha. Quinoa is light and kapha is heavy, so that's a quality that balances kapha. And millet is considered to be a little rough and a little drying. Of course, these are more subtle qualities, so I'm going to use a blend of both of them. And I'll show you as we measure that the measurements don't have to be perfect, and we're going to be cooking it all together, so as long as I have enough water and enough time, it's all going to break down and be easily digestible. The spices that I'm going to use today, and that I always use in Kitchari, for one, is fresh ginger. Fresh ginger right away is going to help stimulate Agni and digestion. I'm also going to use black peppercorns, and if you have just black pepper already ground, that's fine, you can use it. It's a little more pungent, a little more drying when you use the fresh peppercorns, and you don't even need to have a special mill. I just will take probably 4 or 5, put them on my cutting board and smash them and throw them right in like that. Black peppercorns really great for clearing the lungs of excess mucus, healing the lungs, and the lungs are the area and organ of kapha, and this being kapha season, we're particularly just bringing awareness to spices that are going to benefit that area of the body. So the seasonal influences on the doshas are usually generally great for anyone, especially if you're new to Ayurvedic cooking, to heed, because we all have our own individual constitution, we have our individual vikruti or state of imbalance at one time or the other, but we're also all influenced by the external environment. So as long as you don't go too extreme on anything, you really can't go wrong by starting to understand the qualities of the season and those qualities that translate into your food. I'm of course going to include the king of spice blends in Ayurveda, coriander, cumin, and fennel seeds. Coriander, cumin, and fennel all good to stimulate Agni, and they also directly help to burn up toxins or ama. And I have this little, I forget the word. I know mortar and pestle is probably what you're thinking, but this is like the Japanese style one. Similar idea. I'm just going to grind these. Often I use my coffee grinder, it's faster, but I'm going to try this today, just get a little more hands-on. And then as it's kapha season, I have another blend, specifically a masala blend of spices that are pungent and drying and astringent to balance kapha. And I'll post the list of the spices that I have in here so you can make your own if you want to. I definitely know there's turmeric, I know there's fresh ginger, there's a little tiny bit of cayenne, and I think there's a little bit of salt added, cumin, definitely cumin. So I'll create that list for you so you can make that yourself if you'd like. It's wonderful to have little blends for the season around, and then you don't even have to think. You have all the spices prepared and ground, and you can just dash, throw a little dash into anything. And so oil, fats, very important for digestion, for kindling Agni, and also for us to be able to assimilate and absorb actually all the nutrients from our food. And today I'm going to be using coconut oil. I actually just ran out of ghee. I'm going to be making a whole bunch of ghee from some local organic butter on Sunday. But today I'm going to use coconut oil, not traditionally used regularly, particularly for kapha season, but I have a lot of pitta in my constitution, and this will do just fine. And our vegetables today, we're just going to use what we've got. We've got some carrots. I have a summer squash, not summer, but I have a summer squash, and a little bit of astringency. Good for kapha, it's light. And of course, going to use my kale, bitter greens. Good for everyone when they're cooked. So the equipment that you'll need, all you really need is one big pot. I've got a wooden utensil. I like to cook with wood, especially on the enameled surfaces. It's better for the pot. Got a big cutting board, a knife. I'll show you how I chop the vegetables. It's kind of fun. And that's about it. So as I mentioned before, there are many different ways to make kitchari. How I'm going to do it today is I'm going to add the oil to the pan first, and I'm going to roast the spices a little bit. And then I'm going to add the beans and the grains at the same time, the water, and we're going to start and bring that to a boil. So traditionally in Ayurvedic cooking, or I suppose maybe in Indian cooking in general, or your grandmother's cooking as well, you probably noticed she doesn't measure because she's so familiar with the ingredients, and she's just has that sense to how much she needs to add for the flavor. And that just comes with time, but don't be afraid to do it wrong. Don't be afraid to experiment. I know you don't want to waste food, but that's why we start by making just small amounts for ourselves. And you'll probably end up eating it anyway. I'm sure it won't be that bad. So I'm going to add my coconut oil first. And I have this clean spoon. I'm just going to scoop right in. If you are using ghee, you always want to add a dry, clean spoon to the ghee, because ghee can sit out on the counter without being refrigerated and last a very long time. But if there's water added to it, or any food particles, that means it can't sit out for long because it might start to mold. So you always add a clean spoon to your ghee and your oils. So I am not afraid of fat. In my constitution, I need fat. We all need fat. This coconut oil is brain food. It's going to help us absorb all of our nutrients. And so this is probably about 2 tablespoons. And I'm going to add that to my pot and turn this on to medium heat. Kitchari has been one of my most healing experiences, I guess. Food is very emotional, and when we eat a simple diet, and when we come into, again, eating Sattvic foods, fresh fruits and vegetables, spices, whole foods, we get a different experience in the body of the elements. We get a different experience of our world through taste and through the tongue. And we start to realize how manipulated a lot of our foods are, modern foods are. So, especially, of course, packaged foods, even things that are considered to be healthy or natural. And having that experience of such a nourishing meal with completely whole foods has been really healing for me in different ways. One, I've seen my digestion change a lot. I've learned a lot about my digestive capacity and what it truly means to feel hunger and be hungry, which has been huge for me, which maybe sounds subtle, but it's been huge. And I've also personally just seen a lot of change of toxins in my body, especially in regards to the coating of my tongue. And if I haven't shared that experience already, I'm certainly going to write about it soon to share more of that with you. So Kitchari can be made, it's really great to make once a week, just as kind of a food sadhana, as a yoga practice for your food. Eating these Sattvic foods, these harmonizing, clarifying, pure ingredients, can be healing not only to the physical body, but also to the mind. Less stimulation, coming back to what are the pure flavors, pure tastes. You become more sensitive. First you become desensitized, and when we eat such extreme sweets, extreme sour, extreme salty, and it can seem boring at first to come back to the whole foods, and I'm not just saying this, but Kitchari can heal in that way. Again, eating nourishing whole foods, and you truly feel nourished by those with regular experience and regular exposure to that sort of thing. So my oil is warm. I'm going to chop my fresh ginger. I do peel fresh ginger because the skin is pretty fibrous. If you happen to have fresh turmeric, you don't need to peel the turmeric. The skin is pretty thin, and you can just chop that and throw that right into your kitchari. I love ginger. I'm not afraid of getting a big chunk of ginger in my food. So I'm adding quite a bit. Got about 2 tablespoons of oil, and I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons plus of chopped fresh ginger. These are pretty big chunks, but I'm okay with that. Again, kapha season. And measurements in Ayurveda are in Anjali, and an Anjali is about your two hands cupped together. So this is about a half of an Anjali of ginger. And there we go, sizzling a little bit. I'm going to turn it down a bit. Electric stove. So hard to manage the heat. So I'm going to add the black pepper later on. But for now I'm going to add a little bit of my kapha masala. I'm probably going to add, I'm not afraid again, I'm adding over a tablespoon. Kapha season, springtime, we want to add some good flavor. So I am just grinding up a little bit of coriander, cumin, fennel seeds. I often add cumin and fennel whole, but the coriander is just too dry, too hard. It doesn't really break down, so I'm just blending them all today. I'm going to add just about a teaspoon of that. If it's not totally broken down, I don't mind a little bit of that roughness again. Kapha. So this is probably about, a half a cup plus 3/4 of a cup of mung beans. I'm going to rinse them first. Probably could have done that before I had my spices roasting because I don't want them to burn, but I turned them way down. Just going to rinse them quickly. I'm just pouring them into a bowl. I'm just going to run cold water over them twice. And I'm going to do the same with my grains. And I haven't added extra water yet here. I'm just kind of coating my beans with the oil and spices. So I've put to the bowl, I'm going to rinse about an equal amount of the grains as the mung beans, and it's half quinoa, half millet. I'm just coating the beans and the grains with that spices. By now there's a little water in there. That's fine. I'm going to turn my heat back up to medium. And I'm going to add about 10 times the amount of water as stuff that I have in my pot. And this also gives me a chance to get any of the extra grain out of the rinsing bowl. And I'll just stir a few times. I usually don't cover. That's why I add so much water too. Because it's just going to start to, I'm going to bring it to a boil. I'm going to do medium-high heat now. I'm going to keep stirring every once in a while to make sure it's not sticking to the bottom. And I'm going to chop my vegetables while that cooks. And so it's also an art as to how long the vegetables are cooking, because of course we're not going to add the summer squash and the carrots all at the same time, because the summer squash would be super squishy, and the carrots take longer to cook. So the root vegetables, or hard vegetables, are going to be added first, but not quite yet. We're going to let this boil and roll for a little bit. I'm going to take off each end of the carrot, and I cut it while I continue to roll the carrot, and then you kind of get interesting shapes. Cut at an angle, turn half, cut at an angle, turn half, cut at an angle, turn half, and you get these kind of geometric shapes. A little more mindfulness and a little more maybe interest when you're making such simple food. So cutting off the ends. My little dog Kira is helping us make Kitchari today. The sun just came out. We haven't had much of it, and she is anxious for spring to start. I'm going to cut the summer squash the same way, but I'm going to keep it separate or just on the other side of this plate so I can add the carrots separately beforehand. Again, not peeling the summer squash. I want to get all the good nutrients that are in the skin. And the kale is going to be added last after I just shut off all of the heat. So I'm not even going to chop that now. So this whole process is probably going to take about 40 minutes from start to finish. So you've seen me chop the vegetables. Now what there is to do is to bring this to a boil. And then I'm going to scrape off the foam. There's just some of that vata, some of that air once it starts to foam. And we'll continue from there. So our Kitchari has started to boil, and there was some foam on top, and I was taught to remove that foam because it's excess vata that could potentially cause gas coming out of the beans. So I take a ladle and I just skim the top of the Kitchari to remove that foam. And then I discard it. So I've discarded the foam. The heat is to just above medium and it's boiling away, it's condensing. I'm going to add the black peppercorns now and then let it cook, let it bubble away for probably another 7 to 10 minutes. I'm just going to crush the black peppercorns with the flat side of my knife, give them a couple chops and throw them in. After about 5 minutes, if you notice that the beans look like they're starting to break down, it's getting a little more thick, that's when you can start to add your root vegetables, because they'll need to cook for about 15 minutes probably, depending. So I'm going to add the carrots now, keeping the summer squash and zucchini aside. This is just about 3 small carrots. A lot to add. I'm just using carrots today, but almost always I use sweet potatoes, any other hard vegetable like rutabaga, turnip, even radish is nice. So I'm just going to let this continue to quickly simmer, almost boil over medium to medium-high heat, stirring to make sure it's not sticking for perhaps another 10 to 12 minutes. At this point, you could choose to add some dried coconut flakes, which is something I often add. I'm not going to today. They're kapha-provoking, but they're balancing for vata and pitta. If you do add those, again, it's kind of just like a little handful or 2, and they're going to add some creaminess, some sweetness to the Kitchari. So you'll notice that it starts to get thicker. This is a good thing. We're not covering it, so some of the water is evaporating. And remember, this one, you want it to be a one-pot dish, so it's going to be mushy and soft, so it's easily digestible, but it doesn't have to be completely a soup. More vata-pacifying Kitchari would be more soupy. So just continue to stir and just make sure it's not burning or sticking to the bottom of your pot, and adjust the heat as is necessary. The carrots have probably been cooking for about 10 minutes. So I'm going to add the zucchini, the summer squash, and they really just take about 5 minutes. I'm also going to salt it. There's a little bit of salt in the masala blend that I'm going to be sharing with you. Salt kindles Agni. It can increase pitta, but it also can kindle our digestion. So today, all I really have is some very general, generic sea salt. I'm going to use my hand to measure about a teaspoon of salt. If you think about how much salt that is compared to the volume. It's really not very much per individual serving. And I'll just throw that right in, stir it in. And I'm going to wash and chop my kale. It's going to be the last thing that I add. If you want to add fresh cilantro, which I usually do, but I don't have that today. I'm really just making this kitchari from what I've got in my fridge. Then you'd add that at the same time that you'd add the kale. So you can wash and chop that. So you'll notice that we're not adding garlic and onions to kitchari. Garlic and onions are considered to have a different sort of quality, even though they can be very nutritious and medicinal when used appropriately. Garlic and onions are considered to be rajasic, as opposed to that sattvic energy. And these three energies are sattva, rajas, and tamas. Not to get too philosophical, but rajas energy is transformative energy. It's desire, it's passion, it's aggressive, it's aggravating, to force change. And tamasic energy is stillness. It's a heaviness, a stagnancy, inertia, a drawing in, a coming back to kind of groundedness, but it's considered to be kind of a dull, ignorant kind of energy. And sattva is stillness as well, but it's peacefulness, it's clarity, it's harmony, and you can maybe imagine which of those three we have more commonly just in our mind and in our culture and our society. And kitchari is a healing food on many levels, not just that physical level. So we are using sattvic ingredients. The spices have a little bit of rajas because they're a transformative energy, but they're considered to be sattvic spices. Ginger is considered to be the most sattvic spice. Coriander, cumin, fennel have a little bit of sweetness to them, especially fennel. And sweet is considered a sattvic taste. That's why root vegetables are used often in kitchari as well. So I'm going to turn down my heat a little bit, just a little bit, because we're getting sort of thick here and it gets quite hot and I don't want it to splatter and burn me. There's a great story that I love to share with my students in my cooking classes, which I won't have time to share now, but maybe you've heard it before, just about a sage being invited to a king's banquet. And the sage was so pure that he could sense the greedy energy of the people who grew the food that were used at the banquet, and that energy was translated through him in the story, and he became greedy. But even if you don't subscribe to something that subtle, most of us are not that subtle or that pure, I think you can understand that we are what we eat, and we are what we eat beyond just the pieces and parts, even the nutrition value that's in the ingredients and in the food. We all know the difference between a home-cooked meal and one eaten on the run from a fast food restaurant, and that's an extreme example. I'm sure many of you don't eat or frequent fast food restaurants, but even eating out, one, you just aren't knowing everything that's in your food, which is important for some people who are healing. They need to know if there's an allergen in there that's going to aggravate them. But also just thinking of that hectic energy, the heat in the kitchen, the mood of the chefs, the mood of the server that's waiting on you. And that can influence your experience in the moment, but even beyond that, in the cells, the vibration in the cells. So cooking for yourself is sometimes, no matter what it is, first huge step in starting to heal yourself through diet, through food, something I really truly believe in. So we're starting to stick a little bit, starting to get thicker. I might test and taste my carrot, mostly just cut it to see if it's cooked well. Needs another minute or two. So I'm going to turn down the heat. I don't want it to be overcooked, but raw vegetables are not easy to digest, so you want to make sure that they're cooked through. So we're just about finished here. What I'm going to do is add my kale that I've washed and chopped. And it's going to wilt down a lot, so add a lot. This is about a half a bunch that I had left. I'm just going to stir it in. And remember, you'd add your cilantro, your fresh cilantro here as well. And then I'm going to actually turn off the heat once it's all coated with the warm beans and grains. It's quite mushy now. I'm fine with that. I like mushy food at this point. My husband likes to use the whole beans because he likes a little more texture. I totally get that. Some people who can't handle the texture of Kitchari tell them to use brown rice and whole beans. You get a little more oomph to it. And you can also cook the rice and beans separately, which is not really the traditional preparation, but it can help with that texture, especially if you're doing this for days at a time. It helps to have a little variation. And at this point, sometimes I might add more ghee, but you know what I'm going to do is when I serve myself, I'm going to add a little more oil. This coconut oil is what I have. I'm going to slice a lemon, squeeze a bit of lemon on top. That's sour, also has the element of fire to help with digestion. And I have fresh sprouts that I've been growing. They're broccoli sprouts. They're soft. They're raw, but they're soft. They're easily digestible because once you put them on that hot Kitchari, they're going to wilt down even more. And you're still going to get some more of that chlorophyll, more of that those good nutrients in these sprouts. So for me, Kitchari, as I mentioned, has been a huge part of my healing from many different things. I remember it all stems from digestion. And learning about the elements in my food, learning about the qualities of my food, and learning about cleansing as well from the Ayurvedic perspective. I love to share this recipe with people. I teach it with cooking classes, and I'm glad to have this just out there generally for you guys to view. You can email me with any questions anytime at adenaroseayurveda.com. And especially in regards to healing through diet, healing with food, from menstrual difficulties, which I've experienced myself, and from different sorts of digestion symptoms, weak digestion, or even candida overgrowth. I teach a course called The Healing Diet, and it's a 10-week journey through your kitchen and your body, and we'll be starting this September. And if you're interested to join us, I'll encourage you to add your email to the mailing list to be the first to receive the application when that goes out. So I really look forward to hearing your experience with cooking, with Kitchari, with getting in your kitchen, responses to this video. Have a wonderful day, and I will talk with you soon. I'm going to enjoy my lunch. Namaste.